All right, great. Well, welcome any SRES meetup networking group for another valuable educational meeting that we have today. We're going to be learning about the health savings account enchilada and what all those letters mean and what do they do? How can you use them? How are they useful for seniors, especially in using them to fund things like long-term care insurance, um, home care, home modifications, facility care, et cetera, that a lot of people can't find the resources to pay for. So this is going to be pretty valuable. Our speaker is Aaron Rubin, who is the partner at Werba Rubin Papier Wealth Management, and his information will be on there that you can see. He's been a certified financial planner like forever. He's also an attorney. He's a CPA. He's actually my wealth advisor, and he's doing pretty good. So I better not fire him or piss him off. And he's quite knowledgeable about this stuff, as you will see. So I'm going to let Aaron take over and do his presentation.
All right. Well, hopefully we're all seeing my screen. Thank you for the introduction. And so we're going to talk about how to use HSAs when we're thinking about elder care. And I think this is broadly applicable to real estate agents as people start to transition, to either nursing homes, assisted living, that sort of thing, and are looking for resources. And so a little bit about myself. I have an undergrad from Claremont McKenna College in econ accounting, passed the bar, CPA, certified financial planner, worked in public accounting for several years. I've been doing this, my current job, for 15 years. And then I published a book, oh my gosh, 5 years ago. It's all about things you can do as a young person to set yourself up for success. Anyway, today's talk is going to be about around HSAs. So a little bit of background. So this number, 6,250, if anyone wants to guess, is actually the average monthly cost for assisted living. 12,908 is the average cost, and this is in California, by the way, of being in a nursing home. $18,144 is the average cost for having 24/7 care at home. And I got these off of somewhat reliable websites, but more importantly, these ring true to me because I have clients that are in each of these situations. And that $18,000 number is not inaccurate because I have someone doing it right now. And these costs are going to continue to go up, and we all know that. Before diving into the medical in particular, we're going to talk about HSAs. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of different acronyms. A lot of what we're going to talk about falls along the lines of employer plans. And usually when you're at a larger company, you have something called a cafeteria plan, and it does exactly what Chelsea in this picture is doing, where it's just sort of a bunch of different options for you to choose from. And sometimes, the employer will give you some health benefits that you can use, whether it's an HRA, HSA, or FSA, which we're all going to talk about. So don't worry about the acronyms quite yet. Or whatever, any kind of retirement benefit that might be out there for you. If you have a dependent going, whether it's an adult dependent or a child dependent, paying for some of their care on a pre-tax basis, all part of the cafeteria plan, or what's also called the 125 plan after the tax code. And then, of course, some adoption benefits, as well as some group term insurance that you can choose. And people can, you know, if they don't want one, they don't have to take one. If they want to use it, they can. So going specifically into the medical piece of things, there's a number of different acronyms I threw out there real quick before, but let's take a little bit of a deeper dive. So the first one is called the FSA, or flexible spending account. And we're going to actually talk a little more in detail about each as we go through. Another called the health reimbursement account, HRA. And then an MSA, medical savings account, which you may not have heard of, or maybe it's been a long time since you've heard of, and we'll talk about that. And then the big kahuna, the health savings account, the HSA. And each one kind of has benefits, drawbacks, and really important things to know. So again, let's start diving into each one. And the reason why I bring these up, because even though kind of one of them, the big kahuna, the HSA, is the most important, is that you may run into clients along the way that think they have one of these, but they really have another one. And I had a conversation 2 weeks ago. I was doing some financial planning for a client, and they told me that they had an HSA. And when I dug a little bit deeper, they didn't have an HSA. They actually had an FSA. They just didn't know. So part of it is as people tell you what they have, you sort of have to look for certain keys to tell you whether or not they might be a little bit confused. So let's talk about the FSA first. The FSA is offered through an employer. You can't get it any other way. Again, part of that cafeteria plan we talked about before. And what you do is you elect to take out a certain amount from your paycheck through payroll, and it goes into a separate account for you. The benefit is that it's all pre-tax money, meaning that, you know, it's not like, you know, they sent you a check and they took the payroll tax out and they took the income tax out. It's all before all that, but you get to use it for paying your medical expenses, you know, in the current year. It's generally said that it's use it or lose it, although it's not exactly true 100% of the time. But those are one of the keys you need to look for when someone says, oh, I have an HSA at work. Oftentimes they'll say, but it's use it or lose it. And if they say that, they don't have an HSA, they have an FSA. Now, I said it's kind of use it or lose it because certain amounts you can carry forward, or perhaps have a grace period. That's an either or thing. So you're allowed to carry forward, I think $500 towards the next year if you want to, or companies will allow you to have a 3-month grace period, meaning that you can use up the balance of the previous year through March following year. And it's either one of those two things. And then for 2024, the max that a person or employee can contribute to an FSA is $3,200. That's indexed for inflation. So it was a little bit less last year. It'll be a little bit more in 2020.
Can we make sure everybody's on mute, please? Thank you. Go ahead.
So the HRA, again, similar sort of letters, but very different result. Again, offered through an employer, but unlike the FSA, that amount of money that you have to spend throughout the year is not deducted from the employee's payroll. The employer themselves will actually fund the reimbursement account. The card that they'll use. So a lot of you who have had FSAs in the past, you'll know that you usually get like a debit card. And when you go into your dentist or doctor or whatever qualified medical expense you have, which we're going to talk about too, you're going to swipe your card and they're going to deduct it from your FSA. They do the same thing with the HRA. And I know a lot about HRAs because my company offered an HRA for several years and we had a lot of these discussions, but it is fully funded by the employer. And the amount, that pool of money that you can be reimbursed on, essentially can vary widely as long as it's uniformly applied to the employees. So for us, several years ago, our HRA was $5,000 per employee. And so they had that pool of money to work with. Sometimes you're allowed to carry over the balances in HRA year to year, so it can actually accrue to a sizable amount, and sometimes not. I can tell you that at our firm, we did not have it carry over because $5,000 over 5 years becomes $25,000, which again, now you have to plan for that a little bit differently. But again, it's all optional by the employer. Now, once you're no longer with the company, that balance on the HRA goes away. You cannot use it. It's not yours. Moving on to an MSA, the reason why we don't see medical savings accounts as much anymore is because they've been phased out. Starting in 2003, the HSA came into favor, actually was created, and they were really meant to replace the MSA. And the MSA had a very limited role in the healthcare world because it was really only meant for very small companies, self-employed individuals, or companies that had under 50 employees. And so as we've gone along and the MSA balances have been used up, and you cannot create MSAs anymore. And for those, who like history, they used to be called Archer MSAs. But they generally don't exist as much. Again, they're still around technically, very similar to HSAs and a lot of the distribution mechanics that we're going to go over soon. But the funding was different. So now we can talk about the big kahuna. Our big kahuna, the HSA. So the HSA is only available to people that have high deductible health plans, HDHPs. You're going to see that acronym all over the place. And so you say, well, what's a high deductible health plan? Well, the government, of course, has to find that for us. And to have a high deductible health plan, you have to have a minimum deductible of $1,600 for a single individual or $3,200 for a family. So if your deductible is $1,500 and you're an individual, guess what? You can't contribute to an HSA. In addition, there's another restriction to have a qualified HDHP, and that is your maximum out of pocket. If you're a single person, your maximum out of pocket is $8,050. And for a family, it's $16,001. Now, these are all 2024 numbers. Again, they're indexed for inflation, a little bit less last year, a little bit more in 2025. But if you fall into this category, you can make a contribution to an HSA. Now, anyone can make a contribution in HSA. You can gift, family members contributions. They can contribute themselves. And of course, the employer can do so as well. When they first came out, that was quite popular because employers, the cost of these high deductible health plans are a lot less than your traditional, HMO PPOs with the lower deductibles, that the employers would pass on some of the savings to the employees in the form of HSA contributions. And of course, it could also be a mix. So I have clients who on their tax returns, the employer will put in a certain percentage of the HSA contribution, and then they'll just the employee will fill in the rest. And you have until April 15th of the following year to put in the total amount of the HSA contribution. And the best part is it is a current year deduction. So that means that if you put $3,000 in, you'll see on your tax return, you get to deduct $3,000 from your adjusted gross income, which is super cool. We'll take that. Important to note that you cannot deduct it in California. California does not provide for HSAs. Oddly enough, they provide for MSAs, which are essentially the same thing, but not HSAs. It's just one of those weird California things, unfortunately. The other great thing about HSAs is that you get tax-free growth. So not only do you get your deduction, but when you go to invest that money, it will continue to grow and you do not get taxed on it, federally speaking. California is a different story, but those are the breaks. And then the third really awesome thing about HSAs that people really like is that the distributions come out tax-free as long as you use them for qualified medical expenses. Again, we're going to dig into that a little bit deeper as well, but that's sort of the triple threat. That's why HSAs have become so popular as a planning tool among CFPs, is because of all of the great tax attributes that an HSA has. I don't believe there is another type of investment where you get to put something in pre-tax. So you get the deduction in the year one. You don't get taxed as it grows, and then you don't get taxed on the distribution. If you look at IRAs, right, you get the first two, but you don't get the last one. For Roth, you don't get the first one, but you get the last two. But the HSA is really this really incredible tool. So how much can you actually put in your HSA? Well, if you're a single person, again, 2024, that's $4,150. And then if you're a family, $8,300. And then if you're over age 55, you do get a catch-up contribution of $1,000. So if you and your family are on it and you're over 55, $9,300.
That's $1,000 per year then for the catch-up?
Yeah, correct. Every year so the catch-up can also increase with inflation as well, but not necessarily. So it's sort of like an IRA or a Roth IRA that you have that additional catch-up if you're over a certain age. So let's talk about how we're investing, or how we're growing this HSA account. Because whatever you put in that HSA, you can put into the market, and you can use stocks and bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, essentially the universe of publicly available securities. And you can't borrow against it. So no margin on HSAs, but you can certainly invest it for future growth. And what this is all to say is that the HSA is a wonderful tool if your health is pretty good, because the whole idea is that you're not going to end up using the money. The whole point is that you invest it, and that, again, it's getting hopefully market return. If you're aggressive with it, again, that cuts both ways, but over long periods of time, you end up getting rewarded. And I think, at this point, we're 21 years into having HSAs available. And the people that started saving this, if they were in their 40s at this point, are now in their 60s. And if they've been diligent about putting money in and investing it, wisely, they might have some pretty big balances in this account. But again, the trick is not using it when you put it in. And that was my problem with my family, is when I decided to do an HSA, my kids were really little, and kids go to the doctor all the time, and it didn't work out for me. But again, for people that have good health and don't have small children, the HSA is fantastic. It's a savings tool for possibly having money down the line for things that we're going to talk about in just a minute. And always remember that California does not recognize the existence of HSAs. So you should be reporting all of your earnings, dividends, interest, capital gains from your HSA on your California return. California and New Jersey are the big. I think there's another couple states that don't recognize HSAs, but just know that California is going to give you problems. So in regards to distributions, if it is for a qualified medical expense, you do not get taxed on that distribution, which is awesome. Again, you didn't get taxed on it when you put it in, you get taxed on the earnings, and you didn't get taxed when you take it out, which is a great deal. Now, what happens if you pull money out, but you don't use it for the qualified medical expense? The bad news is you're going to pay tax at ordinary rates. So you don't get capital gain treatment on your built up equity in the account. If you're under 65, you can tack on a 20% penalty onto that as well, which is not fun to pay. So Again, if you think you're going to pull the money out sooner rather than later for whatever reason, again, if you're under 65, just be aware that that penalty is hanging out there for you. When you do make a distribution, you're going to get a 1099 SA. And that form is just going to tell you, hey, by the way, whatever custodian it was, and again, mine was at Fidelity, but there's lots of places where you can open HSAs. This amount was distributed from the HSA. And so you're going to go to form 8889, and you're going to say, yep, I distributed X amount of dollars from my HSA. And by the way, I used Y as my my qualified medical deduction, so you can't tax me on it. That's the whole idea anyway. Now, when you make a distribution from California, it doesn't get taxed at all because you've already been taxed on all of the gains and losses and income that you've already had in the account. So the distributions themselves within California will not be taxable. So let's talk just a little bit about qualified distributions. What does it mean to have a distribution that qualifies for that medical treatment? And what we're going to look to is publication 502 the IRS puts out. And it's going to lay out all of the different medical possibilities that you can use to qualify these distributions for. Now, this is just a very short list, right? The actual list is very long. And I'll say this, Skip has been awesome in helping me, compile this, and Skip's done all the work, and he's amazing, and I appreciate it. But again, this list, and thinking about long-term care, any medicines, co-pays, to doctors' offices, glasses, nursing home, obviously, transportation to and from medical appointments. All of these things can qualify, in addition to things that we think of as fairly usual and regular, things like, your CPAP machine, or again, other things that, and it could be home modifications potentially, if you need them, for your medical treatment. Generally, your insurance premiums cannot be used as a medical deduction that's eligible for an HSA distribution. There are some exceptions. So if you have long-term care insurance, that is a deductible expense. Again, you could put it, as an itemized deduction. You can also use HSA to pay for it. If you're on COBRA, you're out of work, you need to pay for those premiums, you can use that HSA. And then, or if you're getting healthcare and you're also on unemployment, you can use it for Medicare, so A and B, but you cannot use it for your Medigap. So any supplemental policies for Medicare not going to be eligible for HSA usage. There's one more that I had in mind. Like concierge doctors. If you pay your concierge doctor beginning of the year, that is not also eligible for HSA distribution qualification. And so again, publication 502 though is your friend on this one.
And Aaron, just to be clear on the long-term care insurance, that's for both the purchase of the initial policy and the annual premiums that are paid then too. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. Yep, that is correct. So again, the list is exhaustive, and certainly I'd point you, to publication 502, or, obviously if you have particular questions about your scenario or a client scenario, to reach out to, either a tax preparer who knows a lot about this, or a financial advisor who's dealt with this as well. So what happens if you don't use your HSA? What happens to it? Now, again, as we mentioned before, if you pull your HSA out after age 65, you're going to get taxed on it, but you can avoid the penalty. So that's always a choice. If someone passes away and they're married, their spouse can continue to operate the HSA as their own. So again, they can preserve that HSA and then pull for their own medical expenses, which is good. However, if it is a non-spouse, the year that the person passes away, that non-spouse has to take a distribution of the full HSA, and they will be taxed on the entirety of the HSA in the year that the person has died and left it to that beneficiary. Now, you cannot roll over an HSA into an IRA or 401k. It's got to stay in that HSA account. There are situations where you can roll over an IRA into an HSA, but it's a one-time deal, and it's only for 1 year's worth of contribution. But it's a cool little trick. But again, it's limited in its applicability. Speaking of tricks, tips and tricks on HSAs. Again, the important thing to note is that when HSAs and high deductible health plans were really created in 2003, it was meant for people not to use them. The whole idea is that, young, healthy people choose to get insurance. It's lower cost, but they're probably not going to use it. So that means they don't want you to go to the doctor. I mean, I think under a high deductible health plan, my recollection is that you're allowed to have one wellness visit with your physician a year at no cost to you. But after that, you got to pay for it. So if you're using your medical benefits a lot, like me and my kids, again, it may not be for you. In addition, when you have a year of high medical expense / low income, doing some tax planning before you choose to use the HSA would probably benefit you as well. So currently, the medical deduction for an itemized, someone who's itemizing on their tax return is 7.5% of the AGI. So for some reason, you're unemployed and you're going to the doctor a lot, you may actually end up using the deduction, and maybe it doesn't make as much sense to use the HSA, because if you're already deducting your medical, you're not really getting that full benefit of the HSA. The HSA is really what's sort of what the whole lofty ideal is that you put it away, so you get your deduction in a high income year, and then when you go to take it out, again, you take it out in a high income year. So you sort of get the best of both worlds. Ideally, and if you need the money because you need to pay for medical expenses, of course you use the HSA. But ideally, you want to use that HSA when you're in a high income year. And as I said, I've mentioned this several times, but California does not recognize the HSA. When you contribute to an HSA, it is an adjustment on your 540 Schedule CA. There is a line for it. And then also you should be reporting the income on your California tax return as well. As always, what I'm talking about today, it's not legal advice. It's not tax advice. Again, everyone's situation is going to be a little bit different. And so if you have questions about an HSA, or you have clients, that are grappling with things, again, I would say talk to a tax preparer about your individual facts and circumstances, just because it's, there's so many nuances that happen. So again, just, be proactive with your tax preparer for sure. And with that, happy to answer questions as best
Actually,
I can.
Before they do, I've got a whole list of questions we might be able to run through and give more details in some of these. For instance, what about estate planning considerations? Do they have beneficiaries, and can you leave them to somebody? You mentioned the spouse before.
Yeah, I don't see why you couldn't leave it to charities. I've never seen anyone do it, but I suppose you could.
There's no beneficiaries involved.
Yeah, there are definitely beneficiaries involved, and I mean, actually you could leave them to charities as well. That way you could avoid the taxation, sort of like an IRA. When you have an IRA, a lot of times, if people have charitable intent, they'll use their IRAs to fund their charitable endeavors for when they die, and then the rest of the money that's stepped up in basis that will often go to living beings as opposed to charities.
Is there anything like the FDIC in savings that protects these funds? And
Yeah. And that's a great question. So it depends on what instruments you choose to use in your when you go to invest. So if you're using stocks, mutual funds, that sort of thing, you're going to have SIPC insurance, and SIPC insurance goes up to 500,000, I think, nowadays. But you can also do like publicly traded CDs, and those CDs would also be those would be FDIC insured if they were issued by a bank. So it's possible.
And how do the plans interact with Medicare, with private insurance, and VA? And if
Yep.
Well, go ahead and ask that, and I'll follow up.
Yeah. So again, with Medicare, you can pay Medicare premiums with HSAs. Not Medigap, not supplemental plans, but all of the copays, that you would owe to your doctor, that would certainly be covered under an HSA distribution as well.
Okay. If you do have a plan, do you even need Medicare like Part C or Advantage plans?
I'm sorry, if you have a plan?
If you the HSA, would that substitute for Medicare Part C?
No, the HSA itself, is just a pool of money. Again, if you don't have insurance, or if there's a gap in coverage, you would end up burning through that HSA a lot more quickly.
And I guess that's the same thing with Part D with the drugs then too.
Yeah. If you didn't have a drug plan, you just be paying out of pocket, using the HSA. So again, working with a person who can run your drug regimen and other benefits that you need through the right supplemental plan. It's important.
And what kind of exposure do these plans have to creditors? Can somebody get to them?
I believe the answer is yes. Gosh, I looked it up and now I'm sort of blanking on it. But I believe the answer is they can't get to them, because what happens is like 401ks and things like that. Those are covered under ERISA. And so ERISA, when you're looking at like bankruptcy creditors, that sort of thing, ERISA plans are generally not subject to creditors, but IRAs, which are not from ERISA-based plans, those can be subject to creditors based upon the state law. So I believe HSAs, I don't think it's an ERISA-based plan. So again, depends on the state law. California is going to be, again, a little bit different.
What about the risk to hackers? Have anybody been able to hack into these funds?
It's because it's essentially just another kind of account. It potentially that's an issue. It's you got to have the same diligence about over an HSA that you would have over any other account that you would own. And so, so whether it's social engineering, people calling up and saying, oh my, I need, gosh, I had a client, unfortunately, get called by a scammer who said, oh yeah, your long lost nephew in New York needs, $50,000. Sure, you can wire money out of these accounts just like any other account. So again, you do have to be careful with that. There's no, if it gets stolen or you accidentally wire it somewhere, again, no one's going to replace it.
Doesn't the employer have, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Julie.
Doesn't the employer have purview over the custodial custody of that money?
So the employer, the employer doesn't have, I don't believe they have custody of the money. They have a third party manager typically that they have providers for that. And then also when you leave the employer, you certainly can move the money into any other HSA account that you want. And you can direct the money to go wherever you want to go.
So third party custodianship.
Yeah,
And then they're at the behest of the owner of the account.
right.
Yeah.
So along those lines, can the owner, the individual, indicate specifically where they want the money to be invested? Like, and also can they invest in REITs or real estate or a real estate?
Yeah. So again, when it's at the employer, I'm a little less conversant in that. The employer may have a plan out there. Once it's in your own HSA account, again, I believe if it can be held in a brokerage account, you can use HSA funds for it. So if it's definitely a publicly traded REIT, you could do. If it's a private REIT, I'd have to look into that one a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, can you borrow from these plans or use them for collateral?
Nope, you can't do that. Again, similar rules to IRAs where it's like, wait a second, this is pre-tax money. You can't treat it like it's, like it's your own quite yet.
Okay.
So there's unfortunately, there's no margin available for those along the way.
Are there any fees or expenses involved in setting these up?
There can be, certainly, custodians may have fees, annual fees for the managing of the HSA. Again, you'll definitely want to read account disclosures to make sure that you know what those would be.
Okay, are there any either minimum or maximum age limits to having one?
Well, no. So yes and no. There's no maximum age limit to have one. And if you have a high deductible health plan and you're in your 90s, then you can have an HSA and contribute to it. Obviously, if you're a minor and you're not working and your parent has an HSA, it's not your HSA, it's the family HSA, and the parent controls it. But yeah, once you have your own plan, then yes, you can have your own HSA.
Okay, and do the plans cover like dental, vision, and hearing?
The high deductible health plans are for health, not necessarily for dental or vision. You can use the HSA funds for health vision for dental, hearing, and vision.
Are they are they loose enough that they would cover things like alternative medicine, acupuncture, and various things like that?
Yeah, they do. They do. So again, and that goes back to the IRS publication 502. They actually specifically mentioned acupuncture in there. So yes.
And can you appeal a denial on any of the claims?
Well, I think, you can, so I'll tell you how I did it. When I had my own HSA is I told Fidelity to send me the money. And so Fidelity sent me the money. They sent me the 1099 SA, and then it was my job to report it to the government on what I spent it on.
Okay, well, that's all the questions I had. Can you bring up the little chart that I sent to you? Do you have the ability to do that?
I do. Give me just 1 second here.
There'll be two attachments to this, and this will be one of them that I created that kind of gives you a summary of what can be used with what plans. And then another attachment will be from a I think it's a Wikipedia definitions of some of these things so that you'll have reference to what they really are.
Almost got it up here.
Or Julie, if you want to share with me, I can bring it up.
I tell you what, I got it. And
You got it?
I'll just resume it right here.
And real quickly, so a self-employed person, can they do their own HSA? How does that work?
Yeah, so you need to have a high deductible health plan. And as long as your plan falls within the limits that I said, you know, with the deductibles being a certain amount and the maximum out of pockets being a certain amount, then yeah, you can use that HSA.
Gotcha.
Anybody else go ahead, have questions? Really?
Okay.
All right, so here you can see the kind of a table of the various plans and what they can be used for and what they can't. It's a little hard to see the color difference on there between the black and the red X's, but it's there. Any other questions? No questions?
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you all for having me today.
Well, thank you very much. And Julie, if you could unrecord.
Come on, Julie.
Say goodbye.
Thank you. All right, we're not recording anymore. Everybody, yak, 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 yak. Got it.
Now we can tell dirty jokes.